Two little girls slept on a park bench, whispering, "Please don't call anyone. We're not bad." A lonely CEO froze, and in that moment, his life changed forever. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Lucas Harrington sat alone on a wet bench in Stonebridge Park, the drizzle soaking through the shoulders of his tailored navy suit. His phone buzzed quietly in his pocket, one of those vibrations you feel more than hear. He pulled it out with little interest, the screen lighting up with two unread messages. One was from his sister. "Still thinking of you today. Happy birthday." The other was a voicemail from a number he hadn't dialed in over 3 years, his late fiancée's mother. The red badge beside her name had haunted him before. It did again now. Lucas stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly swiped both away and dropped the phone beside him on the bench. It landed face down on the wood, screen dark. The park was quiet at this hour, late in the afternoon, just before the city's noise rose again with the evening rush. The gray sky hung low, indifferent, casting a dull sheen over the wet pavement and empty playground nearby. Lucas had told his driver he needed a few minutes. That was over an hour ago. He'd missed his own birthday dinner, a quiet affair he never wanted in the first place. The candles, if any, would be blown out without him. That suited him just fine. He adjusted the collar of his damp overcoat and stared ahead at nothing. The leaves, slick and scattered, clung to the grass like forgotten promises. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe that was the point. The world had kept spinning ever since Mara died, ever since he turned away from everything that felt unstable or unpredictable. Success had been his armor. Loneliness had been the price. A faint sound snapped through the hush, a cough, then the subtle rustling of plastic or paper, not far from the edge of the trail. Lucas sat up slightly. His eyes scanned the misty space beyond the path until he saw it. Movement beneath a worn picnic table. He blinked, unsure if he was seeing clearly through the haze. There were two of them, small, curled up under a pile of newspapers and trash bags, barely noticeable against the shadows of the concrete table. He stood slowly, his body tensing, his breath caught in his throat, unprepared for the sudden adrenaline rush. His polished shoes hit the gravel path with a muted crunch. A single thought pulsed through him. That can't be what I think it is. As he stepped closer, his phone slipped from the bench and landed with a thud in a puddle behind him, but he didn't notice. Every step forward revealed more detail. Two children, no more than 6 or 7, huddled together under soaked layers of clothing. One wore a faded pink jacket with a missing sleeve, the other a hoodie 3 sizes too big. The older one had her arms around the younger, whose small hand clutched the torn edge of a worn, floppy-eared stuffed dog. The older girl stirred, blinking at him as he approached. Her eyes were wide but not fearful, just alert, tired. She immediately pulled the younger one tighter against her. "Please don't call anyone," she said, voice raspy but firm. "We're not bad." Lucas knelt slowly, his knees pressing into the cold, wet ground. He hadn't even realized he was holding his breath until it left his chest in one heavy exhale. Up close, the girls looked even smaller, faces pale, cheeks pink from cold, clothes soaked and clinging to their skin. The younger one, still asleep or barely conscious, let out a weak sigh, curling closer into her sister's lap. "What's your name?" Lucas asked, voice softer than he remembered it could be. The girl didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked to the side, watching the rain fall just inches from the bench's cover, then back to him. "Lily," she said finally. "That's Hazel. She's 6. I'm older. By 2 minutes?" Lucas's throat tightened. "Where's your mom?" Lily's jaw tensed. Her eyes didn't water, but something inside her seemed to shift, like a door closing behind her. "She didn't wake up yesterday," she whispered. For a moment, the city disappeared. There were no board meetings, no towering skylines or marble floors, no unread emails or merger deals. Just 3 people in the rain. 1 man in an expensive suit, and 2 little girls who had no one left. Lucas swallowed hard, glancing at Hazel. Her lips were slightly blue at the corners. He reached out instinctively, not for his phone, not for an umbrella, but for her tiny, ice-cold hand. It was limp but real, and in that instant, something cracked in him. A hairline fracture in the stone wall he'd built around himself for years. He looked back at Lily, whose eyes had not left his face. "We need to get you both warm," he said. She nodded once, no protest, just the quiet agreement of someone too young to argue and too tired to fight. As Lucas lifted Hazel gently into his arms, Lily followed without a sound. Her thin sneakers sloshed through the wet leaves as she kept her hand on his coat. The driver spotted them from the road and pulled the car up without needing to be flagged down, his mouth slightly agape as he opened the door. Lucas helped the girls into the back seat, wrapping his coat around them both as they sat close together. He climbed in beside them, pulling the door shut just as another gust of wind swept through the park. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. Lucas hesitated, then, his voice clear, "Children's urgent care. East side. Now." The car pulled away from the curb. Lily rested her head gently on Hazel's shoulder, holding her sister's stuffed dog in one hand and Lucas's sleeve in the other. And Lucas, who had spent years outrunning pain, loss, and anything that made him feel, sat in silence, wet, stunned, and holding someone else's future in his lap. He stared down at Hazel's fragile frame, then at Lily's unwavering gaze beside her. The city flashed past the window. Somewhere, someone else would blow out birthday candles tonight. But Lucas Harrington would remember this night for a very different reason. Not the day he turned 43, but the night he found them. The ride to the clinic was silent, except for the low hum of the tires on wet pavement, and the soft, rhythmic sound of Hazel's breathing, shallow and uneven, against Lucas's chest. She was still curled into him like a question mark, her head resting just under his chin, her fingers clutching the lapel of his suit as if it were the last solid thing in the world. Beside them, Lily sat upright, alert, her hands folded neatly in her lap, legs swinging just above the floor. Lucas had draped his coat over both girls, wrapping it tight around their shoulders, the weight of its expensive wool comically oversized, but undeniably warm. The contrast was painful. One coat that cost more than a month's rent, now sheltering 2 little girls who had nowhere to sleep. He hadn't said much to the driver after giving the address, just a curt nod and a low-toned drive faster. The moment they reached the East Side Children's urgent care, the door flew open before the car fully stopped. Lucas stepped out, cradling Hazel carefully in his arms. She stirred faintly, a soft noise escaping her throat, but didn't wake. Inside, the triage nurse behind the desk took one look at the scene and pushed a clipboard aside. "Come with me," she said, leading Lucas and the girls through a side hallway without asking a single question. Lily kept pace beside them, her shoes squeaking on the tile, eyes scanning every fluorescent-lit surface like she was memorizing escape routes. They were led to a warm exam room where Lucas gently laid Hazel onto the padded table. The nurse checked her vitals while Lily stood stiffly near the door, watching. Lucas leaned down to Lily's level and spoke gently. "They're just going to make sure your sister's okay." "I know," Lily said flatly. "I've taken her before, but they never do much." Lucas blinked at that. Taken her before. The idea of this tiny child navigating waiting rooms and intake forms alone with her sister was almost too much to absorb. He ran a hand down his face and straightened. "Not this time." The nurse returned a few moments later. "She's dehydrated, low blood sugar, mild hypothermia. If they'd stayed outside another hour." She trailed off, glancing at Lucas. "You got to them just in time." Lucas nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of what wasn't said aloud. If he hadn't been in that park, if he hadn't stayed on that bench, if he hadn't looked up when he did. Hazel was placed under a heat lamp and hooked up to a fluid IV. Lily moved quietly to sit beside her, resting her hand gently on Hazel's arm. "She doesn't like needles," she whispered. Lucas stepped back, his presence suddenly feeling too large in the small room. He stood near the window, staring out at the rain that hadn't let up, droplets racing down the glass like hurried passengers on an invisible track. He thought of the unread birthday text, the voicemail he never listened to, the countless nights he'd sat alone in that penthouse, surrounded by silence and glass and the illusion of control. And now here he was, standing in a pediatric clinic at nearly midnight, heart pounding because a little girl he'd known for less than an hour wasn't breathing deeply enough. A nurse returned with peanut butter crackers, juice boxes, and a thermal blanket. Lily declined the juice but accepted the crackers with a polite nod. "Thank you," she said, before offering half to Hazel, who was still asleep. Lucas watched them silently, their manners, their stillness, the grace in how they survived. Lily didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't ask for anything. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, eyes too old for her age. Hazel stirred at last, shifting under the blanket. Her lips parted, and a small voice, barely audible, escaped. "Mommy said, if we stick together, we'll be okay." Lucas froze. The sentence hit him like a blow to the chest. Soft, ghost-like, but heavy enough to knock the breath from him. That voice. That trust, that unbearable hope wrapped in 7 whispered words. As they stepped out of the hospital, Lucas turned to his driver. "Thanks, you can head back. I'll take it from here." Later that night, long after the doctors had confirmed Hazel would be fine with rest and warmth, Lucas stood in the clinic parking lot staring at the back seat of his car. Both girls were asleep now. Hazel curled under a second blanket, Lily with her head against the door, still clutching the photo he'd seen her hide earlier. It was wrinkled, the edges soft from handling. In it, the 2 girls stood with a woman. Dark hair, tired smile, strong arms. The kind of woman who had built her world around them with nothing but scraps and love. Lucas looked away. The streetlights buzzed above him, throwing harsh white light across the slick pavement. He could smell the oil rising from wet asphalt. He could hear the distant wail of a siren blocks away. And all he could think about was how quickly these 2 children had stepped into the center of his world. He unlocked the car, opened the front door, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior was warm, quiet. Too quiet. His phone buzzed again. A calendar alert. 10 a.m. Axiom merger strategy session. He stared at the screen, then silenced it. Then, to no one in particular, and to everyone at once he whispered, "What the hell am I doing?" But the words weren't defeat. They were the first honest admission he'd made in years. He looked back over his shoulder. Hazel was still holding Lily's hand. Lily was still gripping that photo like it might disappear. And Lucas realized something else. He wasn't driving them to some safe drop-off point. He wasn't going to make a few calls, hand them off, and return to his corner office like this had never happened. No. He turned the ignition key and put the car in gear. "Where did your mom sleep?" he had asked Lily earlier. She had hesitated before answering. "Above the laundromat on 5th, apartment 3C now." The car turned down 5th Street, because Lucas wasn't going home. Not yet. He had to see for himself. The building above the old laundromat looked more like a relic than a residence. Its bricks weather-stained, the painted signage half gone, letters missing or warped by time. The stairwell creaked under Lucas's shoes as he climbed, each step whining like a warning. The air grew colder the higher he went, tinged with mildew, fried food, and something metallic. Old radiator heat or rusting pipes. He couldn't tell. Lily walked ahead of him, her hand tight around the keys strung through a knotted shoelace. She didn't pause or hesitate. She moved with the muscle memory of a child who had done this too many times before. Lucas noticed how she shifted her weight to avoid the loose floorboards, how she used her elbow instead of her hand to open the scratched metal door marked 3C. Inside, the hallway light was out. The bulb above their door flickered, pulsing in and out like a dying heartbeat. When Lily opened the door, a thick wave of air hit Lucas, warm and stale, full of trapped breath, sickness, and exhaustion. It was the smell of neglect, not from carelessness, but from battle, from survival, from running out of ways to keep up. The apartment was smaller than he expected. A single room split by a thin sheet hung on twine. On one side, a sagging mattress sat on the floor, surrounded by crumpled tissues, empty pill bottles, and a single cracked lamp. On the other, 2 sleeping bags lay side by side beside a battered plastic crate filled with children's books, crackers, and half-used crayons. Hazel was still asleep in Lucas's arms. He hesitated at the threshold. This place was too cold, too broken, too wrong. But Lily entered as if it were sacred ground. She took Hazel from him gently and placed her onto one of the sleeping bags, then went to the corner and picked up something from the crate. A stuffed dog with one eye missing. She placed it in Hazel's arms and smoothed her damp hair with practiced calm. Lucas's eyes drifted to the mattress. There, beneath a mismatched pile of blankets, lay a figure. Pale. Still. Too still. He moved closer, slowly, unsure if he was allowed in this space. Every sound felt like a violation. The creak of the floor, the soft buzz of the hallway light still blinking outside. The woman's face was half hidden beneath the blanket, but there was no mistaking it. This was Elena, the mother from the photograph. Lucas crouched beside the mattress. The linoleum floor was ice cold even through his dress pants. He reached out with 2 fingers, pressing gently to the inside of her wrist. No pulse. Her skin was cold. Her chest did not rise. There was a time, years ago, when he might have recoiled, when this scene would have pushed him out the door and into his world of glass towers and elevator silence. But not now. Not tonight. Something inside him didn't panic. It just ached. Quietly, deeply, with the kind of grief that had no words. He looked around the room again, the hot plate unplugged in the corner, the mini fridge humming unevenly. A cracked photo frame turned face down on the windowsill, as if no one had the energy to keep hope upright anymore. Lily knelt beside the mattress. She didn't cry. She didn't look away. Instead, she pulled something from under the blankets. A folded note, taped to a nearly empty medicine bottle. She held it out to Lucas. He took it slowly, fingers brushing hers. It was a handwritten will, scrawled in uneven letters, the ink fading in places. If anything happens to me, please protect my girls. I don't have family. I have nothing left to give them but this note. I'm sorry. I tried. Signed, Elena Brooks. Lucas's hand tightened around the paper. He felt a sharp, pulsing ache in his chest. Not just for the girls, but for the woman who had written this in the dark, sick and alone, still trying to save what she could. She used to sing to us, Lily said softly. Even when she was too tired to talk, she'd hum so we wouldn't think she was hurting. Lucas didn't know what to say. He simply looked at the blanket-draped form of a woman who had given everything and still lost. Lily stood up. We knew this might happen. She told me to be brave, to take care of Hazel if she couldn't anymore. Lucas stood, his eyes still locked on the mattress. You shouldn't have had to carry that, he murmured. Lily didn't answer. She turned away and went to check on Hazel, who was now stirring under the sleeping bag. Lucas followed her with his eyes, watching as she knelt and whispered gently into her sister's ear. Mom's resting. Remember what she said? If we stick together, we'll be okay. Hazel nodded groggily and curled back into the sleeping bag, hugging the stuffed dog tighter. Lucas exhaled slowly. Then he looked down again at Elena, at the woman who had fought as long as she could. And in that moment, he made a decision. He stepped back into the room and pulled out his phone. Hello, he said to the emergency dispatcher. I need assistance at 547 5th Street, apartment 3C. The mother is unresponsive. 2 minor children are present. I'll stay with them until someone arrives. And send someone discreet. The dispatcher confirmed help was on the way. Lucas ended the call and looked around once more. He saw a tin box near the mattress. Inside, tucked between a few dollars and a bus pass, was a note written in a child's handwriting. If you wake up and I'm not here, I went to find food. I'll come back, I promise. I love you. Signed, Lily and Hazel. He closed the lid slowly and set it down with care. That night, Lucas booked a suite at the city's most discreet boutique hotel, one with an adjacent apartment layout. He didn't ask for luxury. He asked for privacy, 2 beds and a kitchen. Something quiet. Something safe. When the ambulance came, Lucas held the girls' hands. They didn't cry. They didn't ask questions. They just stood beside him like shadows. When the medics zipped the body bag, Lily squeezed his hand so hard his knuckles turned white. She didn't say a word until they were back in the car, parked outside the hotel. Lucas turned to ask if she wanted anything. Food, clothes, something warm. But she spoke first. You don't have to stay, she said, voice small but clear. We're used to people leaving. Lucas met her eyes. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Later, after Hazel had fallen asleep in the hotel bed and Lily had dozed off beside her with one arm thrown protectively over her sister's stomach, Lucas sat in the armchair by the window. He stared out at the city skyline, once so familiar, now foreign. The suite was silent except for the hum of the heater and the occasional whisper of Lily's breathing. He looked down at the girls one more time. Then, almost without thinking, he reached forward and gently took Hazel's hand in his. Her fingers were warm now. His thumb brushed over the knuckles once, then again. A quiet vow, unspoken but firm. "I promise," he whispered. The next morning arrived gray and unforgiving. The city still slick from last night's rain. Lucas stood by the wide window of the hotel suite, sipping stale coffee from a paper cup. His suit jacket draped over a chair, shirt untucked. He hadn't slept. Every time he'd closed his eyes, he saw Elena's face, still and pale beneath the worn blanket, and Lily's small hand clutching his in silence. Behind him, the room was finally quiet. Hazel was curled beneath the comforter, her stuffed dog tucked beside her cheek, breathing steadily now. On the fold-out couch, Lily lay facing the window, eyes half-lidded, as if resting but not asleep. She hadn't said a word all morning. Lucas checked his phone. 14 missed calls, 3 from his assistant, 1 from the chairman of his board. The rest, investors, stakeholders, people demanding his time, his decisions, his control. He silenced the screen and slid the phone into his pocket. His mind made itself up as he turned back to the girls. They couldn't stay in a hotel suite indefinitely, and he wasn't going to leave them. Not in the hands of an overwhelmed foster care system or some impersonal emergency shelter. Not after what they'd been through. Not after Elena's note. She may not have known him, but she had trusted someone to come. And now, here he was. By mid-morning, Lucas had pulled every string he had. His attorney, Jillian Marsh, met him at Child Protective Services, an icy woman with sharp suits and sharper instincts. She had represented billion-dollar clients, corporate mergers, and brutal divorces. But this, she admitted under her breath as they walked in, was personal. Inside the CPS office, the fluorescent lights buzzed. The chairs were cracked plastic, the walls covered with children's drawings and laminated rules of conduct. The scent of old coffee and hand sanitizer clung to the air. Lucas held Hazel on his hip. Lily walked beside him with her backpack slung over one shoulder and her chin lifted, wary but proud. A young caseworker named Tanya met them at the reception desk. Her eyes scanned Lucas's face, then dropped to the girls. "I assume you're not their legal guardian?" she asked cautiously. Lucas answered before Jillian could. "No, but I plan to be." In the small conference room they were guided to, Tanya explained the situation. With no living relatives listed on any records, the girls would typically be placed into emergency foster care, possibly separate placements depending on availability. The word separate made Lily's grip on her backpack tighten. "I'm filing for emergency guardianship," Jillian interjected crisply, sliding a set of documents across the table. "We've already arranged background checks, housing verification, and a court appointment for expedited review." Tanya blinked. "That's fast." Lucas looked her in the eye. "I don't leave things halfway." Still, the process would take time. The caseworker asked to speak with the girls privately. Lily hesitated, but Lucas gave her a reassuring nod. When they returned 20 minutes later, Tanya's expression had softened. "Lily said something that stuck," she said quietly, setting her notepad down. "He's the only one who stayed." Lucas felt the words land somewhere deep in his chest. "While your application's being processed," Tanya continued, "we can release them to you under provisional care. But you're taking full responsibility for them until the hearing. That includes physical custody, schooling, medical care, everything." "I know," Lucas said. Back at the hotel, he made one more call, to Bernice, his former housekeeper, the only person he'd ever trusted inside his home after Mara died. She had retired 2 years ago, moved to Arizona to be near her grandchildren. But when she heard his voice and the situation, she didn't hesitate. "I'll be on the next flight," she said, "and I'll bring cocoa mix and my good pillow." Lucas smiled for the first time in days. By evening, they were moved into a furnished apartment suite in his building, one usually reserved for out-of-town clients. But Lucas had stripped the cold edges from the place in record time. New twin beds delivered, a rug spread across the hardwood floors, framed prints of animals and flowers replacing corporate photography. Bernice arrived just after sunset, bursting in with bags of blankets, cookies, and motherly energy. She wrapped both girls in warm hugs, calling them sugar plums and angel pies without a blink. Hazel instantly melted into her embrace. Lily was hesitant, but even she cracked a shy smile when Bernice pulled out 2 hand-sewn scarves from her bag. Over dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Lily stared at Lucas across the table. He was still in his shirt sleeves, hair tousled, eyes tired but more present than he'd been in years. "You laugh different now," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Different how?" "It doesn't sound fake anymore." Bernice chuckled. "Children don't lie, Lucas. You better take that as a compliment." After dinner, the girls helped Bernice clean up, Lily drying the dishes while Hazel recited the alphabet backwards, giggling the whole time. Lucas watched from the doorway, hands in his pockets, the weight in his chest shifting from pressure to something like peace. Later that night, after Hazel had been tucked in and Lily had finished brushing her teeth, Lucas sat on the edge of her bed. She hesitated before climbing in. "I know we're not your kids," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, why are you doing all this?" Lucas stared down at his hands, then slowly looked up at her. "Because once, a long time ago, someone needed me, and I didn't show up." He paused. "And I've regretted that every day since." Lily was quiet. Then, with surprising gentleness, she said, "You're showing up." Now he nodded, eyes shining. "Yeah, I am." He rose to leave, but she reached out, tugged at his sleeve. "Will you be here in the morning?" He looked down at her. "I'll be here," he said. "Every morning, as long as you need me." And for the first time since he found them, Lily laid back without resistance, pulled the blanket to her chin, and closed her eyes. Outside the window, the city kept humming, its lights flickering like distant stars. But inside that apartment, inside this fragile, unfamiliar new beginning, there was quiet. There was warmth. Lucas sat alone in the living room afterward, his phone on the table, still buzzing with meeting requests and unread messages. He didn't answer a single one. He sat in the silence and let it settle into him. He had a promise to keep. The mornings came differently now. Lucas used to start his day with an alarm synced to his stock alerts and a custom-roasted espresso delivered by his personal assistant before the sun even rose. But today, like the ones before it, began with the sound of giggles from the kitchen and the smell of slightly burned toast. He stepped out of the guest room in a t-shirt and joggers, an outfit Bernice had practically thrown at him his second morning with the girls. "You look less like a CEO and more like a human," she'd muttered while handing him a spatula. He hadn't argued. In the small kitchen nook, Hazel sat cross-legged on the counter, swinging her legs while munching a banana. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Mr. Lucas, Lily's making skyscraper waffles." Lily, standing at the toaster with narrowed eyes and a shaky hand, flipped a waffle onto a plate where 2 others were already stacked. "It's a tower," she said proudly, Like the one from your downtown office. Lucas couldn't help but laugh, genuinely, without hesitation. I've never seen one with syrup elevators before. It's innovative, Lily replied, reaching for the whipped cream like a seasoned architect. Bernice rolled her eyes from the sink. It's sticky chaos, but I'll allow it. They sat down at the table together. The two little girls giggled between bites, making up a story about how Lucas was a giant who lived in a waffle castle. He played along, pretending his coffee was dragon fire. It wasn't perfect parenting, but it was real, and more honest than anything he'd built in years. After breakfast, Hazel danced around the apartment in mismatched socks, dragging her stuffed dog and humming a made-up tune. Lucas found himself watching her, really watching, the way she swirled without a care, her hair tangled, her joy unfiltered. It made his chest ache, in a good way, in a way he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. He turned to Bernice, who was organizing the bookshelf for the third time this week. I haven't thought about real estate in 3 days. She looked up, amused. And the world hasn't ended. Imagine that. In the corner, Lily had settled on the rug with a stack of printer paper and her colored pencils. Her tongue poked out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. After a few minutes, she stood and approached Lucas, holding out her newest creation. He took it gently. It was a drawing of him, taller than the others, wearing a long blue cape and carrying Hazel on one shoulder and Lily by the hand. You're not Superman, Lily said, watching his face. But you stayed. That's kind of better. Lucas stared at the picture longer than he meant to. There was something childlike about the way she drew his hands. Big, but careful. Gentle. The heart stitched into the cape wasn't red. It was gold. His voice was quieter than usual. I don't know what to say. You don't have to, she said, and walked away, already grabbing another sheet of paper. He carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into the inner pocket of his jacket. His chest felt heavier and lighter all at once. Later that afternoon, Lucas walked through his penthouse for the first time in days. It was spotless, like always, the air cool and still, untouched by laughter or sticky fingerprints. He stood in the doorway of his home office and looked at the glass desk, the untouched leather chair, the framed award from some real estate gala he couldn't even remember attending. He didn't belong here anymore. He went to his bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and packed only what he needed. That evening, they returned to the temporary apartment with takeout tacos and a pint of strawberry ice cream. Hazel insisted on reading bedtime stories, even though she barely made it past page 3 before falling asleep mid-sentence, stuffed dog still clutched in her lap. Lucas tucked her in carefully, then turned to find Lily already under her blanket, watching him. Do you miss it? She asked suddenly. Your real house? Lucas sat down beside her. I used to think it was everything. But he looked at her, really looked. It was quiet, too quiet. No laughter, no dancing, no burnt waffles. She smiled sleepily. No dog? He grinned. Definitely no dog. She shifted under the covers. I like this better. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Her eyes fluttered shut. Back in the living room, Lucas sat in the dark, phone glowing softly in his hand. Dozens of missed calls. His team was likely in chaos. The Axiom deal, the one he'd spent 2 years preparing, was set to close in less than a week. He scrolled through the alerts, the contract drafts, the media briefs. Then he selected every message and hit mark as read. All of it could wait. Instead, he opened his camera roll and looked at the photo he'd taken earlier that day. Hazel and Lily on the couch, surrounded by coloring books and waffle crumbs. Hazel's stuffed dog perched on Lucas's head like a crown, while the girls laughed so hard they nearly fell over. He tapped the screen, set as wallpaper. That night, while the city hummed outside and the streetlights cast warm orange streaks across the ceiling, Lucas sat beside the girl's door, not as a bodyguard, not as a CEO, as someone who stayed, as someone who was becoming something else entirely. And when he finally turned out the light and whispered goodnight, it wasn't just to them, it was to the man he used to be. The morning light filtered through the tall glass dome of the botanical gardens, casting a soft golden glow over the winding paths and dew-speckled petals. The air smelled faintly of lavender and damp earth, and for once, there was no rush. Lucas walked slowly beside Lily, while Hazel ran ahead, arms outstretched like wings, weaving between flower beds with squeals of delight. Her laugh echoed off the greenhouse walls like wind chimes in the sun. It was the kind of peace Lucas hadn't felt in years. He carried 2 paper cups of cocoa, one for himself, one for Lily, who took hers with both hands and blew across the top like a ritual. She looked more like a child today. Not because her face had changed, but because something in her shoulders had relaxed. A small thing, but meaningful. "Mom used to bring us here," Lily said, almost shyly. "When she felt good, she'd make up names for all the flowers. That one," she pointed to a drooping orange bloom. "She said it looked like a sleepy lion." Lucas smiled. "It kind of does. She said if you whisper to them, they remember your voice." He nodded, unsure what to say. The words were beautiful, bittersweet. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice. He almost ignored it. Almost. But the third buzz came with a name on the screen that stopped him cold. Carl Duncan. Lucas's jaw tightened as he stared at it. Of course, Carl's attorney must have pulled his number from the court filings. Contact details were always part of the record. His thumb hovered over the notification. He tapped. It wasn't a message. It was a scanned letter. An official notice from family court. Carl Duncan, listed as the biological father of Lily and Hazel Brooks, was filing for full custody. Lucas's breath caught. The warmth of the moment cracked. The cocoa trembled in his hand. "Lucas." Lily's voice was small, uncertain. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. Hazel came bounding back, panting, cheeks pink. "I found a snail!" Lucas blinked quickly, forcing a smile. "That's great, sweetheart." But the peace was already gone. Back at the apartment, Mara Jensen sat across from Lucas at the dining table while the girls colored quietly in the next room. Her brow was furrowed as she flipped through the printout Lucas had handed her. "This changes things," she said, her voice low. "He may have been absent, but the courts still recognize parental rights. He hasn't been in their lives. He hasn't sent money. He hasn't made a single call. How is that even allowed?" Mara sighed. "Because he's their biological father. And in this state, unless we can prove he's unfit or dangerous, he has legal standing." Lucas leaned back, pressing both palms to his face. His heart pounded, not with fear, but fury. He'd seen this before, in his own life. His father, walking out with a suitcase and a shrug. His mother, too proud to chase him. And Lucas, left in the wreckage, pretending none of it hurt. "This man doesn't even know Hazel," Lucas muttered. "He wasn't there when Elena was dying. He wasn't there when the girls were freezing under a bench." Mara nodded. "I believe you. But belief isn't enough in court. We need evidence. That night, Lucas sat in his bedroom, staring out at the city skyline through the window. But the lights didn't sparkle. The view didn't impress him. It looked like what it was: cold, unreachable, and full of judgment. He hadn't meant to print it, but his fingers had moved before his thoughts could catch up, as if holding the paper would make it less surreal. The petition from Carl now sat on the nightstand like a live wire. Lucas's mind spun with memories. His fiancée's trembling voice the night he told her he wasn't ready to be a father. The slam of the door. The regret that followed, sharp and endless. He had left once. He had failed someone who needed him. And now, he was being asked to stand again. But this time, he wasn't going to run. The buzzer rang downstairs. Lucas stood slowly, unsure who would visit at this hour. When he opened the lobby door, no one was there. Just a courier envelope resting on the mat. No return address. Inside, he found several photos and a notarized letter. Elena's face looked back at him from the first image. Her left eye swollen, a bruise curling across her cheekbone. Another photo showed Carl yelling outside a clinic, arm raised, expression twisted. The third was a security cam still, Carl grabbing Elena's arm so tightly it left marks. The letter was from Elena's former supervisor at the women's clinic where she'd once worked. It described multiple incidents of Carl showing up intoxicated, threatening her, even once breaking a window. Attached was a signed affidavit and a sworn statement from a nurse who had witnessed Elena arrive with a fractured wrist, but refused to report it, afraid of what would happen if she made trouble. Lucas swallowed hard, the weight of it pressing into his chest. This wasn't just neglect. This was abuse. This was a trail Elena had tried to escape. This was the reason she had never spoken Carl's name around the girls. Lucas sent the entire packet to Jillian with one line: "We fight with this." When he stepped back into the apartment, the lights were low. Bernice was washing dishes quietly. Hazel had already gone to bed. But in the living room, Lily sat curled on the armchair, knees to her chest, staring at the framed photo of her mother they'd placed on the mantel. Lucas moved toward her slowly. She didn't turn. "You got bad news, didn't you?" He hesitated, then sat beside her. "Someone from your past wants to be part of your future, but he hasn't earned it." She looked up, her voice trembling. "Will he take us?" Lucas didn't blink. He didn't falter. He crouched in front of her, taking her hands gently. "Not while I'm breathing." Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. And in that quiet connection, one built not on blood, but on choice, on consistency, something unspoken passed between them. A promise. A fight. A family. The courtroom was colder than it had any right to be. Sterile, echoing, indifferent. A place where lives were shifted, rearranged, sometimes decided in minutes by people who didn't know the full story. Lucas sat quietly at the table near the front, his hands folded, his breathing steady. Across the aisle, Carl Duncan adjusted his too-tight collar and avoided eye contact. Hazel wasn't here. She was back at the apartment with Bernice, coloring in her sketchbook with one of Lucas's old blueprints she'd turned into a jungle for bunnies. But Lily sat beside Mara, her feet barely touching the floor, her small hands resting on a worn, floppy-eared stuffed dog that had somehow made it through every transition, every change. Carl spoke first. He told the court he'd made mistakes. He said he'd turned his life around, was working construction now, sober for 14 months, ready to be a father. He referenced starting fresh, wanting to be there for his girls, and not being proud of the past. Then the judge asked, "What's Lily's middle name?" Carl hesitated, swallowed. "I think it's Marie." The silence that followed was sharper than any gavel. Even the court clerk stopped typing. "What's Hazel's birthday?" the judge asked next. Carl blinked, mouth slightly open. I wasn't there when she was born." Lucas watched it unfold without blinking. The man across from him wasn't a father reclaiming what he lost. He was a stranger trying to play a part he hadn't earned. When it was Lucas's turn, he stood in his plain navy suit. No tie, no pocket square, no power symbols. Just him, steady, present. He didn't read from notes. He didn't posture. He spoke the way you do when everything you're about to say has lived in your chest for weeks, waiting to be let out. "I'm not their biological father," he began, "but I'm the one who found them. Cold, alone, sleeping under a bench the night after their mother died. I didn't plan to become anything to them, but I stayed. I stayed because no one else did." He paused. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who stays when no one else will. It's who packs lunches at 6 a.m., folds tiny socks that never match, and learns what "I had a bad dream" sounds like at 2 in the morning. It's the person who doesn't leave, even when it would be easier to. He looked toward Lily without needing to say her name. "I didn't come here today to prove I deserved them. I came here because they deserve someone who won't walk away." When he sat down, there was a stillness in the room. Even Carl seemed smaller now, shrinking into his seat, adjusting his cuffs as if they could hide the gaps in his story. Then came Lily's turn. She entered the witness room through a side door with Mara beside her, the courtroom itself shielded behind one-way glass. The judge sat at a lower table, voice gentle. Lily held a folder in her lap. Inside was a drawing, crayon lines that told a story words couldn't. 3 stick figures stood under a crooked sun. One tall, one medium, one small. The tall one had a cape. The medium one held a stuffed dog. Above the picture, she had written in uneven letters, "My family." "Lily," the judge asked kindly, "can you tell me who that is?" She pointed. "That's me, and Hazel, and Mr. Lucas." "Why did you draw this?" "Because people keep asking if we want to go live with the man from before." She paused. "But he's not in this picture." "Why not?" Lily didn't hesitate. "Because this is my family now. Mr. Lucas didn't replace anyone. He just didn't leave." The judge didn't ask another question. An hour later, everyone returned to the main courtroom. Lily rejoined Lucas, slipping into the seat beside him and reaching instinctively for his hand. The judge adjusted her glasses, glanced between the 2 tables, and then looked directly at Lucas. "In light of the testimony, submitted affidavits, and compelling evidence of a stable, loving, and present guardian, the court grants full legal guardianship of Lily and Hazel Brooks to Mr. Lucas Harrington. Visitation rights for Mr. Duncan are denied pending further psychological review and monitored supervision assessments." The gavel didn't fall hard. It didn't need to. The sound of Lily exhaling beside him was louder than anything else. Carl stood and stormed out without looking back. Lucas didn't watch him go. He turned to Lily, who was blinking quickly, unsure if she was allowed to smile yet. "You did good," he whispered. She nodded, her fingers still tight in his. As they stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent courtroom lights giving way to the softer afternoon glow, Lily paused near the elevator. Her small hand reached up to tug his coat sleeve. Do you think everything will stay like this? She asked, her voice barely audible. Lucas crouched to her level, forehead resting gently against hers, his hands steady on her shoulders. I do, he said, because I'm not going anywhere. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and together they stepped into their future. The morning sun spilled through the wide windows of their new apartment, casting soft amber light across the hardwood floors. The craftsman-style unit sat on the third floor of a quiet tree-lined block, not far from the botanical gardens. The space was filled with warmth, not just from the gentle heat of the radiators, but from the energy inside. Laughter, cinnamon, and a quiet sense of safety that hung in the air like a lived-in blanket. Lucas padded into the kitchen in his socks and a gray hoodie layered over a dress shirt, his new morning uniform. He stirred oatmeal distractedly while Bernice bustled behind him, humming some old jazz tune and pulling a fresh tray of muffins from the oven. The scent of blueberries and vanilla clung to everything. Across the room, the dining nook had been transformed into an art corner. A string of twinkling fairy lights framed the wall, lined with Lily and Hazel's newest masterpieces: crayon suns, stick figure superheroes, and at least 6 renditions of their stuffed dog wearing sunglasses. Do you think bunnies get hot in summer? Hazel asked, appearing in her pajamas, one sock on, the other missing. She held up a new drawing with a sun wearing a cowboy hat. Lucas grinned. Only if they don't wear sunscreen. She laughed and slid onto the stool at the counter, grabbing a muffin with both hands. Then stuffed dog definitely needs a beach hat. Lily wandered in next, her hair in a loose braid, still sleepy but smiling. She looked around the kitchen, then leaned against Lucas's arm. Did you sleep? She asked. A little, he said. She looked up at him. You still do that thinking face when you sleep. What face? This one. She squinted and furrowed her brow in imitation, like you're trying to build a tower with your brain. He chuckled and ruffled her hair. Maybe I am. But you don't build towers anymore, she said softly. No, he agreed. Not the kind made of steel. After breakfast, the 3 of them bundled up in scarves and coats and walked to Stonebridge Park. The air was cool and clean, the trees nearly bare but still clinging to a few orange leaves like stubborn reminders of fall. The bench was still there, the one where it had all started, but they didn't sit. Instead, they brought breadcrumbs and fed ducks by the pond. Hazel skipped rocks across the water, each splash followed by a tiny squeal of delight. Lily climbed the low wall and balanced like a tightrope walker while Lucas walked beside them, filming the chaos on his phone and occasionally shouting, "Careful!" with a grin. Near the bench, a small plaque had been newly affixed to the wooden slat. It was simple, etched in dark brass. Family isn't who finds you, it's who stays. Lucas paused to read it again, a lump rising in his throat. He hadn't asked for the inscription. It had been Bernice's idea. But it said everything. They stayed at the park until the sun began to dip, the sky turning from gold to dusty rose. On the way home, Hazel demanded selfies. Lucas knelt in the leaves, holding the phone high as the girls hugged him from both sides, their cheeks pressed against his, their laughter bright and free. That evening, the apartment glowed. Bernice made pot roast and let Hazel stir the gravy, while Lucas helped Lily with a math worksheet that somehow turned into a game involving jelly beans and exaggerated groans of defeat. After dinner, the girls disappeared into their room. When they returned, Hazel was holding something behind her back, barely able to contain her excitement. "We made something," she said, tugging Lucas toward the fridge. But you have to close your eyes first. He played along, hands over his eyes. Okay, she whispered, placing something cold into his hand. Now open. It was a drawing. 3 hands, one large, one small, one tiny, linked together in a heart. Inside the heart were 3 names: Hazel, Lily, Lucas. Underneath, in Hazel's careful block letters, it read, "Forever Family." "This one," she declared proudly, "goes on the fridge forever." Lucas couldn't speak for a moment. His throat tightened. He turned to the fridge, found the strongest magnet he could, and placed the drawing front and center, over the bills, over the calendars, over everything. He sat down on the couch, heart full, eyes misty. Hazel climbed into his lap without asking. She curled there easily, like she'd always belonged. Lucas looked down at her, one arm around her tiny frame. "You didn't just find me, Hazel," he said softly, kissing the top of her head. "You saved me." Across the room, Lily rested her head on Bernice's shoulder, a quiet smile on her lips as she watched them. Outside, the city pulsed. Cars passed, horns honked, lives rushed on. But in their home, in this little corner carved out of chaos, time slowed. There was nothing missing, nothing else needed. Just them. Together. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you that love often comes wrapped in the most unexpected moments, then we invite you to stay. Subscribe to Restoring Tales for more tales that touch your heart, heal your soul, and remind you that even on the hardest days, tomorrow is still a gift. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.